The weight of pronunciation in the curriculum has varied widely in the history of foreign language instruction. At the forefront of structurally based approaches in the 70s and early 80s, it reverted to being the poor relation of foreign language instruction in the 80s era of the communicative approach. During that time, prosody, that is the rhythmic and intonational aspect of language, was held to contribute more significantly than individual sounds to meaning negotiation and to the successful expression of opinions. The 1990s saw reconciliation over the importance of both individual sounds and prosody in pronunciation instruction, and the survey of current textbooks and workbooks conducted for this study reveals that this perspective prevails in the late 2010s. Positing comparable contribution of prosody and individual sounds to successful communication, it is argued in this paper that optimum introduction to pronunciation in textbooks would prioritize a balanced approach to, but also, a fully contextualized presentation and practice of both individual sounds and prosody. What makes pronunciation, presentation, and practice communicative? A possible answer to this question may include information, which directly addresses the pronunciation challenges found in the grammar and vocabulary of the lesson, and the inclusion of contextualized practice activities which are based on meaningful interaction, preparing learners to successfully function in the target language. The most recent editions of 5 French textbooks and accompanying workbooks or lab manuals were reviewed for their treatment of pronunciation within the communicative approach. Their selection resulted from a survey of the most commonly adopted texts as of March 2010, featured in the online bookstores of 75 randomly selected American universities. The analysis considers both the presentation of pronunciation information and its implementation in practice activities in each book. It concentrates on the degree of focus on pronunciation found in each book, the format used for presentation and for practice, and the extent to which information, presentation, and practice are contextualized. Segments and prosody are covered in separate sections. Unlike the other 4 textbooks, pronunciation sections in Début only appear in the workbook. In Demande, they are featured in both textbook and workbook, appearing in the textbook as brief, 1 to 2 line tips focusing on the specific pronunciation topic. They are integrated, at least visually, into the rest of the lesson's material, from which they barely stand out. In the student editions of Horizon, Vis-à-vis, and Chez Nous, information is visually more prominent. It is either contained in boxes set in the margin next to the language forms addressed, or in self-standing and clearly separate boxed or highlighted sections inserted into the body of the page. Unlike Demande, pronunciation information in these texts systematically includes both specifications regarding the various spellings of the sounds at hand, and a presentation of their articulatory characteristics contrasted with those of related English sounds when applicable. All 4 student editions featuring pronunciation information are generally successful at selecting words for illustration of a particular sound from the current or at least past lesson, which favors the incorporation of pronunciation presentation into a contextualized and communicative framework. Presentation format in the workbooks sample also varies. In the Horizon and Chez Nous workbooks, pronunciation presentation is not repeated, and students are referred to their main text for explanations. In Vis-à-vis and Demande, it appears in sections usually located at or near the end of a chapter, whereas in Début, it is featured in several shorter paragraphs placed at various strategic points in the chapter. The next phase consists in applying this information to communicative activities, which allow students to practice their pronunciation skills in duly contextualized and meaningful interaction, preparing them to successfully function in the target language. Discrimination exercises are prominently featured in Chez Nous, Horizon, Vis-à-vis, and Début. Students hear 2 or more sounds presented in sentences, in isolated words, or in minimal pairs, and indicate which one they heard. Textbook authors clearly strive to present students with discrimination activities that are contextualized. However, their efforts are often limited not only by the number of minimal pairs that can appear in the same context, but also by the information contained in the context, which can help students infer the solution to a problem and make discrimination efforts unnecessary. The results of the survey suggest that it is easier to create context for discrimination activities covering contrastive sounds which carry a grammatical function and which novice Anglophone learners typically mispronounce than it is for activities with a more traditional approach to sound discrimination, such as the one used in phonetic classes. Opportunities for production practice abound in the textbooks and workbooks reviewed. They include pair activities in which cues guide students as they converse on a lesson, exercises in which students read and pronounce specific words, phrases, or sentences, contextualized fill-in-the-blanks activities originally designed for grammar practice, in which students orally supply the contents of the blank, contextualized questions prompted by the teacher, which students are invited to answer, and listen and repeat activities in which students listen to words featuring specific sounds and repeat them. All of these activities elicit student production of sentences and/or words containing target sounds featured in pronunciation sections. While an overwhelming majority of the words featuring target sounds in these activities is drawn from the current lesson, only a few of them are contextualized or even semantically connected. Since these are activities practicing production skills and not discrimination, where contextualization opportunities may be more limited, the absence of a general context and the lack of meaningful connection between sentences do not appear to be warranted. Indeed, contextualized word and sentence-based practice will make for more purposeful and communicative activities that are as engaging and functional as the contextualized exercises designed for vocabulary and grammar practice. In her discussion on learning French pronunciation at the beginner and intermediate level, Dansereau recommends coverage of individual sounds, but also of prosody, which includes intonation, accentuation, tension, and the like, explaining that comprehensibility can be affected by errors at the segmental level, but also at the prosodic level. All of the textbooks and workbooks surveyed include information on the selection of the prosodic aspects of pronunciation. The findings indicate that liaison is the notion which receives the most extensive coverage. It is effectively presented with concise and clear explanations and reviewed repeatedly. The notion is practiced via perception, discrimination, and production activities. For example, students listen to short sentences and mark the space between final consonant and initial vowel where liaison occurs, or select oui when they heard a liaison and non when they did not. The analysis reveals a surprisingly low occurrence of fully contextualized activities practicing these prosodic aspects. Some activities feature semantically disconnected phrases and short sentences. Others do include sentences that are contextually related but randomly ordered, which considerably affects their connection and may make it more difficult for students to process them. Intonation and accentuation are also covered in the 5 textbooks and workbooks analyzed, although only once. As for liaison, information about intonation and accentuation is introduced in a comprehensive and effective manner and practiced in a variety of ways. For example, while they listen to words and sentences, students are sometimes invited to tap their finger for each syllable they heard. Their production can also be guided by intonation curves drawn above sentences they are asked to repeat. Although the words and sentences in these activities are mostly drawn from the current chapter, they are rarely organized into semantically cohesive and contextualized sets that would promote a communicative approach to the acquisition of intonation and accentuation. Tension is also presented and practiced in Chez nous, Début, Horizon, and Vis-à-vis. Although Deux Mondes covers the pronunciation of vowels throughout its workbook, it only likens French vowels to similar English vowels without drawing the learner's attention to the notably contrastive degree of muscle tension involved in the pronunciation of French vowels. This characteristic may significantly contribute to meaning discrimination, as, for example, in the distinction between le journaliste, la journaliste, and les journalistes, respectively referring to the masculine singular, feminine singular, and plural version of journalist. Perception and production are generally exercised via listen and repeat activities. The analysis reveals that the words and sentences featured in these activities are successfully connected and contextually related, but in only 2 of the textbooks reviewed.